In the Philippines, parents don't just tell their children to come home before dark. They mean it. Because in Filipino culture, the night belongs to something else. Ask anyone in the Philippines, from a fisherman in the Visayas to a lawyer in Manila, if they believe in the Aswang, and you'll get an answer that surprises you. Not no, not that's just a story. You'll get a pause, a careful look. And then, more often than not, I don't know, but my grandmother saw one. The Aswang is not one creature. It's a category, a whole taxonomy of supernatural beings that share one common trait. They appear human during the day and become predators at night. They are shapeshifters, skinwalkers, vampires, ghouls, and witches, depending on the region, the island, the family telling the story. And unlike most mythological creatures around the world, the Aswang is not fading. Surveys conducted as recently as the 2000s found that a significant percentage of Filipinos, across all education levels and socioeconomic backgrounds, expressed genuine belief, or at the very least, genuine uncertainty about the Aswang's existence. This is the creature that the CIA once used as a psychological weapon. This is the myth that has survived colonialism, Christianity, modernization, and the internet. This is the Aswang. The word Aswang doesn't have a single clean translation. It's an umbrella term. The closest English equivalent might be monster or supernatural predator, but even that doesn't capture the full meaning. In Tagalog, Visayan, and other Filipino languages, Aswang encompasses a range of creatures that Western mythology would categorize separately. The origins of the Aswang belief are ancient, predating Spanish colonization by centuries. When the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, they found the Aswang already deeply embedded in Filipino spiritual life. The earliest Spanish colonial accounts, including those by Miguel de Loarca in 1582 and Francisco Ignacio Alsina in the 1600s, described the Aswang in detail, noting with some alarm how seriously the indigenous population took the threat. The Spanish, predictably, tried to use the Aswang against the Filipinos. Catholic missionaries framed the Aswang as demonic, proof that the pre-colonial animist and spiritual traditions were satanic and needed to be replaced with Christianity. But the strategy backfired. Rather than abandoning the Aswang belief, Filipinos simply integrated Christianity into their existing framework. The Aswang became a creature repelled not just by garlic and salt, but by prayer and holy water. The myth absorbed its conquerors. What makes the Aswang genuinely unusual in world mythology is its proximity. In most cultures, monsters live far away, in deep forests, in ocean depths, in mountain caves. The Aswang lives next door. She is your neighbor, your coworker, possibly your relative. She looks normal. She acts normal. The horror of the Aswang is not that it comes from somewhere else. It's that it's already here. Filipino folklore recognizes at least 5 distinct types of Aswang, each with its own characteristics, methods, and degree of terror. The first, and most iconic, is the manananggal. This is the creature that makes the Aswang unique in world mythology. The manananggal appears as an ordinary woman during the day, but at night her upper body separates from her lower body at the waist. The upper half, torso, head, and bat-like wings, flies through the night sky, leaving the legs standing in place. The manananggal targets pregnant women, landing on the roof of a house and extending an impossibly long, thin, thread-like tongue through the thatching to feed on the unborn child, specifically the fetus's heart. The defense against the manananggal? Find the lower half while the upper half is hunting. Sprinkle salt, garlic, or crushed garlic on the exposed waist. When dawn comes and the manananggal tries to reattach, it cannot. Exposed to sunlight without its lower half, it dies. The second type is the tick-tick, named for the sound it makes. The tick-tick produces a distinctive clicking or ticking sound as it approaches. But here's the terrifying detail. The louder the sound, the farther away the creature is. When the ticking becomes quiet, almost imperceptible, that means it's right next to you. The third is the balbal, a ghoul that feeds on the dead. It haunts graveyards and wakes, stealing corpses and replacing them with banana tree trunks shaped to look like the deceased. Families who discover the switch are left with the horror of knowing something ate their loved one. The fourth is the wak-wak, similar to the manananggal, but associated specifically with the sound of flapping wings. In some regions, the wak-wak is considered a separate species. In others, it's simply another name for the manananggal. The fifth is the Aswang in its most basic form, the witch or sorcerer. This type doesn't necessarily fly or separate. Instead, it uses magic, potions, curses, and manipulation. It might curse your livestock, cause illness in your family, or turn the community against you. This type of Aswang overlaps significantly with the concept of the Mangkukulam, the Filipino witch. Filipino communities developed an elaborate system for identifying Aswang, and the methods are fascinatingly specific. The garlic test. Rub garlic on a person's skin. If they flinch, if their skin reddens unnaturally, if they show discomfort, suspect them. Garlic is to the Aswang what kryptonite is to Superman, except that in the Philippines, people actually hang garlic at windows and doors as genuine protection. The oil test. Filipino folk practitioners use a special oil, often coconut oil blessed by a faith healer or albulario. If the oil boils or bubbles when an Aswang is nearby, it confirms the presence. Some families keep a bottle of this oil by the door, checking it every evening. The inverted reflection. Look into an Aswang's eyes and you'll see your reflection, but upside down. This detail appears consistently across regions and is one of the most widely known identification markers. Physical characteristics were also monitored. Bloodshot eyes, particularly in the morning, suggested nocturnal hunting, an aversion to church, to prayer, to religious symbols. Unusual beauty or charm, because the Aswang often takes an attractive form during the day to avoid suspicion. For repelling Aswang, the arsenal is extensive. Garlic, salt, vinegar, holy water, blessed metals, stingray tails hung above doorways, and, crucially, the tail of a stingray was used as a whip. The thorns on the tail were believed to cause searing pain to supernatural creatures. Perhaps the most poignant defense is simply noise. Communities would gather, play music, talk loudly, and stay awake through the night when an Aswang was suspected nearby. There is something deeply human about this. Facing the darkness together, refusing to be silent, drowning out the tick-tick-tick with the sound of community. Now, the part of this story that sounds like fiction, but is documented history. In the early 1950s, the Philippines was fighting the Huk Rebellion, a communist insurgency led by the Hukbalahap, a guerrilla movement that had originally formed to fight Japanese occupation during World War II. After the war, the Huks turned their weapons against the Philippine government, demanding land reform and social justice. The CIA was involved. This was the Cold War. Losing the Philippines to communism was unthinkable for American strategic planners. And the man they sent to handle it was Edward Lansdale, an Air Force officer and CIA operative who would later become infamous for his involvement in Vietnam and the Bay of Pigs. Lansdale was unconventional. He believed in psychological warfare, and he understood something that most Western military planners did not: the power of local belief systems. In his memoir, In the Midst of Wars, Lansdale describes the operation directly. His psychological warfare team learned that Huk guerrillas in a particular region were deeply afraid of the Aswang. The fighters were often local villagers, and they carried their village beliefs with them into the jungle. Lansdale's team devised a plan. They captured a Huk fighter on a jungle trail. They killed him. Then they punctured his neck with 2 holes to mimic vampire bite marks, and drained his body of blood. They hung the body from a tree where the other Huk fighters would find it. The message was clear. The Aswang is here. It's hunting in this area, and it killed one of your own. The result was immediate. The Huk unit abandoned the area. They retreated from a strategically important zone without the Philippine military firing a single shot. The Aswang, a myth, had won a battle in a real war. This is not conspiracy theory. This is not folklore. It is documented in Lansdale's own writings, corroborated by CIA operational histories, and discussed in academic analyses of psychological warfare. The United States government weaponized a Filipino myth against Filipino people. It is one of the most disturbing intersections of mythology and military power in modern history. And it raises a question that has no comfortable answer. If a myth is powerful enough to change the outcome of a battle, is it still just a myth? So why does the Aswang persist in the 21st century, in a country with smartphones, universities, and a globalized culture? Part of the answer is structural. The Philippines is an archipelago of over 7,600 islands. Many communities, particularly in the Visayas and rural Mindanao, remain relatively isolated. Oral tradition is strong. Local identity is powerful. The Aswang is not a national myth imposed from above. It's a hyper-local phenomenon, with each community maintaining its own version, its own stories, its own recent sightings. But there's a deeper reason, and it's social. In Filipino communities, the Aswang accusation functions as a form of social regulation. To be called an Aswang, or to have your family associated with the label, is devastating. It can lead to ostracism, violence, even murder. And the people most frequently accused are those who are already marginalized: widows, the elderly, the poor, outsiders, people who don't conform to community norms. Scholars like Maximo Ramos, the foremost academic authority on Philippine lower mythology, have documented how Aswang accusations track social tension. When a community is under stress, economic hardship, a disease outbreak, a political conflict, Aswang sightings increase. Someone must be blamed. And the Aswang framework provides a mechanism for that blame. This is not unique to the Philippines. It mirrors witch-hunting dynamics across cultures, but the Aswang version is remarkable for its persistence and its specificity, for the fact that in 2026 there are still communities where a credible Aswang accusation can upend a person's life. The Aswang shifts its shape not just in mythology, but in geography. Every island, every province, every town has its own version. In Capiz Province, often called the Aswang capital of the Philippines, the Aswang is deeply woven into local identity. Capiz residents have a complicated relationship with the label. Some embrace it with dark humor. Tourism campaigns have occasionally leaned into the reputation. Others resent it, arguing that the association stigmatizes their province and discourages investment. In the Visayas more broadly, the manananggal dominates. The image of the upper body flying through the night sky is quintessentially Visayan. In Luzon, the Aswang is more often associated with witchcraft and curses, the Mangkukulam tradition. In Mindanao, the mythology intersects with indigenous Lumad and Moro spiritual traditions, creating hybrid creatures that don't appear elsewhere. On the island of Siquijor, sometimes called the Island of Witches, the Aswang tradition merges with a strong folk healing tradition. Siquijor's faith healers, or mananambal, are famous throughout the Philippines, and the line between healer and Aswang is sometimes dangerously blurred. The modern Aswang has also migrated to cities. Urban Aswang stories feature the creature hiding in plain sight, as a coworker, a neighbor in a condo, a vendor at a market. The myth has adapted to urbanization, proving that the Aswang is not a creature of the jungle, it's a creature of proximity. The Aswang is not one creature, it is a mirror. It reflects every fear a community can hold: fear of the outsider, fear of the night, fear of the woman who doesn't conform, fear of the invisible forces that take children before they're born. It has survived 5 centuries of colonialism, conversion, modernization, and globalization because it is not a fossil. It is alive. It adapts. It moves to the city. It takes new forms. It absorbs new religions and new technologies and keeps hunting. And perhaps the most disturbing thing about the Aswang is not the creature itself. It's the fact that the CIA proved what the Filipinos already knew: belief is power. A myth that people believe in is as real in its consequences as any weapon. The Aswang is out there, not because it exists, but because we need it to. Every culture needs a name for the thing that hunts in the dark. The Philippines simply gave that thing more names than anyone else. Next time on Myths of the World, we travel to Japan, where 3 a.m. is not just late, it's dangerous. The hour of the ox is waiting.